What is it that you want people to leave with?
Takeaway of this exhibition, I want them to feel seen and reminded that their own personal histories are important. And I want them to think about the way that they can use textiles to project information, to share their stories, to share who they are, and that when you look at other textiles, clothing, it's all saying something. It's really just an extension of this idea that clothing has embedded stories in it. So there's a connection between what's happening in the gallery and what's happening really just outside every day.
I'm curious what your motivation here is. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm also
Oh,
curious
yeah.
like what's drawing you.
I searched for legend, I looked for local history, and I reached out to a filmmaker. I'm not sure why I decided to do this, or why I chose to make the choices I did. I can only hope by the end of this process, this project, my decisions, and their experiences make everything clear. If you could just say your first and last name for me.
My name is Amanda Lee.
All right, thank you so much. I say we just start off. Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, what would you like to know?
Uh,
How long have you lived in Clarksville?
yeah.
Well, I was born here. I moved to California when I was 6 years old and came back when I was 13. Other than that, I've always lived right here in this zip code.
All right.
How long have you been living in this house?
18 years.
Oh, wow. How do you like it so far?
How do I like living in this house?
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was a lovely house until I moved in it. The people who owned it before me were friends of mine. I'd known them for 20 years or more, maybe longer than 20 years. I always thought it was just a really nice house, and I guess I'm glad to have it. But once I moved in it, it started falling apart. But so far I've been able to keep it standing, and I'll probably be here until I die or go to the nursing home. So I'm happy with it. It's all mine, so I'm just gonna be happy with it.
All right. Yeah, just stay here, okay?
I started doing shows when I was 20. I'm 62 now, and I guess I can say I've just enjoyed every minute of it, although there were times that it was very challenging.
I was gonna ask a question. Or you got a question?
Oh, no, do you have one?
I was just gonna ask, where's that private club at in
It was,
Clarksville?
let me see, I don't know what's in there now, and you all are too young to remember Highsmith Shoe Store, but it was in the building Highsmith Shoe Store used to be in. It was downtown. I think maybe there might be a restaurant in it. And the police would really give us a hard time. They would come in. I've counted as many as 17 at one time. And all they wanted to do was just intimidate everybody. And they did a really good job. So many people would get up and leave. There might be 125 people at the bar, and after the police were gone, there would be 12 people left. But people back then, they didn't want their cars to be seen parked near the gay bar. They would park blocks over, and the military would always put the clubs off limits as soon as they heard about them. Things have definitely changed. I think partially because, it became popular for gay people to come out, which I never had to do. Everybody just always knew I was gay.
I don't know. I honestly I sort of only feel comfortable talking about my own experience and not necessarily
Oh, yeah,
talking about other
absolutely.
people's. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally,
Um,
I get that. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, another kind of question. I guess this one might be a little much trickier to ask, but
Go ahead. I have no. I mean, I'm gonna try to answer anything you ask me. And I'm not gonna be offended or anything.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I grew up in Atlanta, so I grew up in an urban context. My parents are politically very liberal. My godfathers is like the people who my parents sort of brought me into contact with in a way that was sort of like as if they were my godfathers. It's a couple of gay men. So in many ways, I grew up with people around me saying that like this was a possibility. This is a way that like human beings exist, and it's not something that we're going to hide. I didn't come out to my parents until I was in my last year of college. And that was something that was also a part of working on a first film where I talk about being gay. So there was something there that felt dangerous or uncomfortable. I wasn't at ease with it. And I think a lot of that contributed, not entirely, but I think a lot of that contributed to me leaving the state to go to college and then going abroad. And it's been like a little over 10 years. I haven't lived in the US as an adult. I'm in Spain now. This is where I live with my boyfriend. And I was in France for many years, and I lived in Mexico for a while.
Can you bring the camera a little closer to you?
Is that better?
Yes, yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, I just rested on the steering wheel here. Let me move the steering wheel a bit. Okay, I can do that. Damn, I'm old. Oops, I just lost you there. Not see me. Okay, turn it back. Okay. By the way, getting old is really cool. A lot of advantage to getting old. So, here I am.
Yeah, your thumb's blocking the camera. Right there, yeah.
Right. That's interesting, because I had no idea where the camera was on this sucker.
Oh.
But now I know. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that, man, I'm just a good person and I was making a change for mankind and benefiting society. But I'm afraid the reality was more of a young guy who was really into partying and didn't have anything to do for the summer. I got to Austin Peay pretty late because of my active duty service. I was like 28 years old. I had been a paratroop leader, so that kind of personality tends to carry over into the college years. And so I was involved with different groups on campus. You got the Pikes, and then you've got the Army ROTC cadets, and then you got the student government group. And it gave me a good introduction to a cross-section of society there. The gay thing was interesting because having grown up in Europe, I didn't have to deal with that coming out of the closet thing. Never heard of the closet. When I transferred from the British Army to the American Army, I was just me. And, the Army was like, whoa, okay. We don't do that gay thing. Like, well, you do now. I'm here. So it was I didn't have to deal with a lot of the crap that apparently a lot of people had to deal with in terms of coming out. And I was never in, and dealing with, and that's another interesting thing, dealing with discrimination. I remember there was one guy, he was a theater major, and he was really a cool guy. And he said, man, one of these rednecks is going to stick a 12-gauge shotgun in your door and blow you away. And, my reaction was kind of to laugh and to say, yeah, bring it on. Now, most of these redneck guys he's talking about, they're my fraternity brothers. Mm-hmm. And again, having a finger in each pie, I think, helps there.
How can Brazil and her people help us to win the war?
In 1974, I was in love with Steve, a helicopter jockey on the Huey combat helicopters that supported our infantry. We purchased a house off base where I continued to live when I moved from active duty to ROTC at APSU. Then at night, I came home to Steve, his tight, muscular body sweaty in his flight suit. We were two hyper-masculine guys living the perfect life. To love, then naturally it could only be with another soldier. The plan was for me to get commissioned, and then we would go on to become generals together, leading armies into battle to protect America. We were young and idealistic. The dream came crashing down in just one day. Military police officers showed up at my door to tell me that Steve's Huey had crashed and burned. The Army was good to me. They took me to his bedside at the Army hospital. He was naked, unconscious, and burned black from his waist to his ankles. The doctor told me he wasn't going to make it, but they were going to fly him down to the burn center at Fort Hood, Texas. I called his mother before we boarded the medevac flight. Life turned foggy after that, kind of numb. I remember sitting on the floor, hugging his flight suit, relishing his smell, and crying like I'd never cried before. One of my frat brothers came over and held me for what seemed like hours.
Just little things like trying to get recognition, that started the whole avalanche of gay rights work. Those were the first wave of cases where we being litigators for gay rights issues, those were kind of the first cases where we started winning. And based on that, we had other victories. So I think it was really important that those students did that. And to me, it was really important that Southern students did it too. I just kind of hate when our movement or any other movement acts like, we can't make any progress in the South. Like, I just don't accept that. Like, I know all the history and racism and all the things that make the South a little bit different, but at bottom, we're all the same people. When I first moved here in 1979, like, I was the only openly gay lawyer in the state. At the time when you kind of had to keep it quiet. So no, I don't think there was a lot of support for it. It wasn't like in those days you could get amicus, friend of the court briefs from big church groups and, it was so different litigating these cases in the 70s and early 80s, so different. Like now, the big organizations like the American Bar Association and, the Council of Churches and the Chamber of Commerce, even sometimes. I mean, these groups do briefs in support of our issues now, but that was like a dream that seemed like it would never happen back then.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's good service. My wife brought me lunch because I'm working at home.
So now I was alone, a college student, and I was all in. I drilled the officer training cadets on campus. I gave speeches at the student government meetings. Sometimes I even went to class. I worked off-campus jobs, and I filled my nights banging everything that walked. Cute freshman boys, sorority sisters, cheerleaders, male and female. Anything to stop the hurt. One night, there was a knock on my door at the dorm. It was a group of 4 or 5 extremely effeminate guys. I had never come across an effeminate guy in my life. I didn't know how to act. I listened. They said they had heard I was gay, and since I was some kind of big man on campus, maybe I would help them start a students' gay club. I am now embarrassed to say I blew them off and got them out of there as quickly as I could. I could not relate at all. Every guy I had ever known and been close to was infantry, cavalry, special forces, and as far from these girlish guys as possible. Suddenly, I realized now that I had a mission.
Back at that time, it was like maybe a university in Los Angeles had a gay group, maybe another one in Minnesota had a gay group. So we were like, whoa, you're in Tennessee, dude. What the hell? Not the place you'd expect to see it. When we called it for gay rights, we were talking about, hey, we want the right for the university to provide us a meeting room just like you provide the other groups.
Richard Lewis was the first president's name, but I have no idea where he is, and I haven't looked up on Facebook, so I don't know. Anyway, the vote was 25-1 in favor of recognizing us. The only person that voted against it was a person who represented the Baptist Student Union, which wasn't surprising. Got that passed, and then we had to send it to the vice president of student affairs, denied us recognition. And the reasons they gave, which were really stupid, they said if it was a gay organization, it would just encourage people to have gay sex, and that it went against the Judeo-Christian ethics that undergird our college, our community, and our society, which we thought was pretty harsh.
you know, we had one of the really old-fashioned sodomy laws that was called Crimes Against Nature and had been upheld in a challenge to it based on vagueness, that people would know what that meant. And it was the exact language was something like the abominable and detestable crime against nature is like a major felony. It carried a 5 to 15-year penalty. And that was the law when they challenged the thing. So they were putting themselves at some risk that somebody could arrest them and say that they're violating that law.
Yeah,
And I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, so anyway, like people who are gay, that would, if they were on the borderline or something, if they weren't just sure about themselves, having an organization would encourage them to have sex. And, you know, the organization was not a dating service. You know, we just met and we're trying to educate people about gays and lesbians. We knew we would have to go to court to win this. And then the president got the appeal, and he turned us down too. And he was pretty nasty in the way he responded. He said that there was no place on this campus for an organization like ours.
But I went to, now Billy Hembry, I went to his funeral, and there wasn't room for another person. But the person, the minister who did his funeral, he did everything but just come right out and say, well, he went to hell. I mean, it was the worst funeral I've ever seen. And his mother's a dear friend of mine now. And she was just so upset, I guess she didn't pay any attention. But I remember seeing her and thinking, she just doesn't look like she'll ever stop crying. But the preacher was just, well, his parents said he's a Christian, but it's like he was looking for something good to say, but he just couldn't think of anything. It's like his mind was made up that he was a queer, he's gone to hell. I don't know what to say. I used to work at the gay bars. Well, until recent years, I worked at all of them. I used to work the door, checking IDs and collecting cover charges. And that was not an easy job because I had to deal with everyone who came through the door. Crazy people, and a lot of people who were being initiated to, what do you call them at Austin P?
Fraternity?
Yeah.
Mm.
They would have to come in, you know, as part of their initiation. And, you know, they would have something cute to say. And I've been egged. I've had people open the door and egg me. And, well, there have been a couple of times when people even came in with guns and kind of held us at gunpoint. And it was just kind of bad and scary. Somebody came in, tore up all of the DJ equipment, all of the stereo equipment and everything. And they cut the phone lines. And there were no cell phones back then. But there was one extension that they didn't realize we had, and somebody did call the police. And anyway, we made it through.
Do you remember the first time you went on stage?
Yes, I do. I'll never forget it in my whole life. I had to be the most nervous person in the world. I've seen a lot of people do their first show, and none of them were ever anywhere near as nervous as I was. I mean, my knees were just knocking. I was so nervous, but I wanted to do it so badly. And I was determined I was going to do it. And the first two songs I ever did were I'll Never Love This Way Again by Dionne Warwick, and it was at the top of the charts at the time. Music has changed over the years. And I feel sorry for the young people because they make fun of the old people, you know. Trust me, they don't know what fun is. Us old people, we partied, we had the disco, and oh man, it was just, we knew how to have fun. We did. This music, oh gosh, there's not one single song I want to hear. Every one of them just gives me a headache. And but I did Dionne Warwick, The Best Thing That Will Ever Happen to Me. Oh, excuse me. I'll Never Love This Way Again. And I did Angel in Your Arms by Hot. And that was a fairly, you know, it was still played on the radio all the time. And I was extremely nervous, but the songs were only a few minutes long, but it just felt like they were a half hour long. But there were a line of people waiting to tip me, and they did applaud, and I made it through. And I started entering all the talent shows. And this was January of 1980, and I would say within a month or 6 weeks, I was hired to the cast. And I pretty much have done shows ever since. I don't do them often now, and I haven't done any since the COVID thing because I have respiratory issues, very low functioning lungs, and my doctors and my pharmacist told me if I get the COVID virus, it will kill me. So I wasn't so eager to get out in a crowd. And a lot of times when people tip you, they want to kiss you on the cheek, and I just don't want to die from the COVID virus. So I just kind of stayed away.
Having to lie, I feel, is the saddest and the ugliest part of being a homosexual. When you have your first bad love experience, for instance, and you can't go to your brother or your sister and say, I'm hurting.
But it was more like when I was a kid, I pretended to be straight, or I pretended to to be attracted to women. And then there was something about feeling comfortable acknowledging the desires that I had. It was uncomfortable then to be around people who had this sense of continuity vis-a-vis the person I was when I was a kid. And there's always something like that when I go home to Atlanta, not only from my parents, but from everyone. People look at you as if you're still kind of the person that you used to be. And the person that I used to be is definitely a part of who I am. When I went to college, nobody knew me, and I could be gay. I came out immediately. I didn't tell people back home, but that was sort of a harder process.
Tell me how you feel about being here today.
I feel it's beautiful. It's fantastic.
How many years have you been a homosexual?
I was born homosexual. It's beautiful.
You know, everybody thought gay people were pedophiles, and all they thought about was sex, and that a gay person would have sex with any man at all, no matter how old or nasty or funky or undesirable he was. And that's just not the case.
And you think that you're happier now that you've realized exactly where your feelings lie?
Indeed, I'm just sorry that it took so long. I'm sorry that I spent so many years in the closet.
There are different degrees, I think, of comfort. And there are things that I'll never understand about people who are older than me, but it's not only people who are older than me. I was going to say that there are risks with expressing sexuality, but I'm also thinking of a friend and colleague of mine who is Black, who grew up in North Carolina, and his experience being queer is so much different than mine, even though we're exactly the same age. And I think that there was a lot more risk and a lot more danger that he navigated as a young person, and even today, because not only is he queer, he's also Black. And I could compare that to like people I know who are in their 50s who didn't feel comfortable coming out until they were maybe in their 30s. And that in all of these instances relates to ways that we've experienced risk or perceived risk related to how people think about our sexuality.
When I was a child, I believe I actually thought I was a little girl. I guess I realized I was gay when I first heard about gay. I think I was in the 9th grade when it occurred to me that I think I'm a queer. And I didn't like it, you know, and I didn't want to be like that. I just always took up for myself.
And people weren't excited about it. People thought that, you know, like schools can do that. Like, who are those gay people? And of course, they didn't call us that in those days. They probably called us some bad name, but, you know, who are they to do that? Like, the school doesn't want them to, that kind of thing.
The organization was allowed to continue to exist while the judge took it under advisement and he granted the preliminary injunction. And then they finally had a hearing in his courtroom. And it's a federal court, which was smart. The state wanted to have it in a state court because the judges are elected and they would be more likely to do what the people of Tennessee wanted, whereas a federal judge does what the Constitution tells you to do. And it was clearly a free speech, free association issue. And due process, equal protection. I mean, it violated all of the things in the Constitution. We knew that we would win, and they had nothing but prejudice. And then we had all of these really expert witnesses. So it was a slam dunk. The judge didn't have any problem at all. They agreed to a settlement, and the settlement basically was that we won. They had to allow us to exist as an organization, and they call it with prejudice, meaning if they did anything that kept us from meeting, then we could take it back to the judge. So that was pretty significant that it affected all of the other schools. And like I say, we were the first one in Tennessee and one of the first in the nation to have a gay and lesbian student organization. And what's interesting is I wasn't tenured, of course, at the time. And the president would have loved to have fired me, and he could have. All he had to do was just say, no, I don't recommend you.
People used to tell me when I first came here, like, how can you put up with that? Like, why don't you leave? You could practice in a state where it would be so easy. And for me, it's like, if people don't like me because I'm gay, they can leave. Why do I like Tennessee? Why do I have to leave? So that's always been my philosophy, but, you know, different world now, which all of us who did these cases and brave students like that, you know, led to where we are now.
And I was just saying that, you know, it was time. We won the battle, and it was time just to have somebody else who would spend more time with them, and probably if it would be gay person too, who would be more involved, and that's exactly what happened. So, but anyway, basically that's a summary. I can't think of anything else that I've left out.
Down their window when I was walking, called me some names and stuff, and I'd say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. And by the time they could say it again, I had my gun out. They would hit the gas. I fired a couple more shots. You know. Mm-hmm. I never shot anybody, but I fired a whole lot of warning shots. And you'd be surprised at how it will change their whole attitude.
But each time I've been down south, I've made a point of driving up to Austin Peay and driving around the campus. And that's always kind of an interesting experience. It's nice to know that there's some continuing form of gay activity organization on campus. It don't belong to me. It's not something I left behind. It's just something that's really, really cool.
I can't remember the first time that I saw one. I'm trying to think. I mean, the question of pride about sexuality there are things that I love about passing for straight in certain situations, and then there are also things that I hate about that. And I think something about a flag is you're being very categorical about something. You're saying like, here is a label or a flag or a symbol. And in the same way that like being hidden has a lot of possibility, a symbol also has a lot of possibility. You can inhabit it with whatever you want to inhabit it with. I think for a while there was something that made me fearful about announcing the fact that I am queer. And I think thinking back to like 12 years ago, that would have just been totally terrifying to me. And it seems so benign now.
I don't know how to do anything but just be me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I think it works.
You know, so.
I think it worked, man.
Well, that was it. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
If
Good
you had
luck
any-
with your paper.
It's actually a documentary.
Oh, okay. Good luck with the documentary.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry I used bad words then.
Oh, it's totally fine.
To these questions and going towards other people to sort of think through these questions. What's drawing you?
So, like, do you think there's any way to do a film and it not be about yourself? Like, I don't know if that's even possible. Like, even if I do something about something that's totally different than me, I don't know how not to, like, how the story ultimately could not be anything but about me. How you edit it, what you choose to bring out, the universal themes, in the DNA somehow.
We're all different people, and we all have different positive characteristics and negative characteristics. And but as long as we treat each other nicely, kindly, as humans, respectfully, doesn't mean we all have to go out and go to bed together. So, well, that too, I suppose. I was using that metaphorically, but,
And because I'd asked a woman out for a date, and they say, "Well, I thought you were gay." And I said, "Well, I haven't decided yet. Maybe you can convince me otherwise." But that's about it. I didn't keep, didn't have cell phones back then where you could keep all these and stuff. And they're all hard copy pictures. If you would like, I could make a copy of at least one or two pictures of me around that time, if you would like. Although if I'm on Zoom, people will see me, but want to see what I looked like back then.
Also really like your painting that's behind you.
It's something that my boyfriend got that I did not hate, and it's grown on me, and I've decided that I like it now. Oh, it also looks, I normally hide my self view, but I just turn myself back on, and I like the way it looks it's great on camera.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Kind of reminds me of kind of those old Batman comics, the way that they portray.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I've come to really love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Great to talk to you, Paul, and
you too.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I was saying, on the one hand, I think it's great that we're, like you, are memorializing the history of our movement, because we don't want young people to forget it. I mean, in a certain way, I don't want younger people to go through all the things that we did, or the even worse things that people older than me went through. But also, I want them to understand what we did go through to get to where we are, and that you can't take anything for granted. I mean, our right to marriage equality Our right to anything is not really secure with the current Supreme Court, which doesn't seem to respect the rule of law, that they'll overturn longstanding precedents like Roe. I mean, marriage equality hangs by a thread with these guys on the court. And I use guys intentionally for those right-wing people, including Amy, Tony, whatever her name is. So yeah, I think this is a really important time, and that we have to be really cognizant of and protective of our rights. And so it's good that people like you are going to write about it and remind people what it used to be like, because we have to still protect it now.
The piece is to blow away a wall. It says it's easy. Close your eyes, concentrate, and blow. So I'm going to stand on the X, and I'm going to close my eyes and concentrate. And then blow.
Well, I was doing a comedy song here. I know you've never heard of this song called Forbidden Fruit.
I think I have.
I know you haven't. I guarantee you haven't. It starts out, Eve and Adam had a garden. Everything was great. Till one day a voice said, pardon, miss, my name is Snake. See that apple over yonder? If you'll take a bite, you and Adam both are bound to have some fun tonight. Go on and eat. It's quite a treat. Now we'll throw fruit out.
Tag him with an apple. Oh my god. Maybe like strawberries or like
just a variety of fruit.
For the